It goes without saying that Jeff Gordon is one of the most decorated and purely talented NASCAR drivers of all time. Anything there was to accomplish in the Cup Series, he did, and then some. All the crown jewels, championships, milestones, Jeff checked every box you could think of multiple times. He was a no-brainer first ballot Hall of Famer, the face of the sport for over a decade, and is on the NASCAR Mount Rushmore for almost every race fan you come across. I don't need to waste any more time explaining in detail how great he was, because unless you live under a rock, you already know. But there's an old saying that every Superman has his kryptonite. Even the best of the best in each respective sport has their failures. They are human after all. Tom Brady couldn't beat the Giants. Clayton Kershaw had the postseason. Michael Jordan had baseball. But in the case of Gordon, one of the only few blemishes on his near spotless resume was the much maligned Texas Motor Speedway that was basically shunned from the get-go by most NASCAR fans. Given the fact the facility effectively replaced the beloved North Wilkesboro Speedway in the blue-collar region of the racing community while alienating many longtime loyal race fans in the process, the track was always going to have an uphill climb to win over anybody outside of the Lone Star State. But add on top of that all the flaws the track were constructed with that led to a rather lackluster product, and it was quickly becoming a liability for the sport that everyone and their brother were fed up with. It was naturally going to clash with several drivers' emotions, but claiming one of the all-time greatest as a yearly punching bag was unexpected to say the least. There's no way around saying it. Jeff Gordon sucked at Texas Motor Speedway. It was his kryptonite. Any inaugural race at a brand new racetrack is almost always going to produce growing pains. The pavement is fresh and there's no rubber laid down, which creates one-groove racing with little green flag passing. But the construction crew for the track didn't exactly do a great job with the entry of Turn 1. The track was modeled after mile-and-a-half cookie cutters Charlotte and Atlanta, but unlike those well-established staples on the circuit, this place didn't get the same treatment. After 2 years of being exposed on the very first lap, that section of the track would be mended on for several years to correct the mistake that was made in the original rendering. To start off this stretch of misfortune for Gordon, you don't have to go far. The very first edition in 1997 in the Interstate Batteries 500 would be his rude introduction to the Speedway. Now Jeff actually led a big portion of the early going in this race, 69 laps to be exact, but when he made contact with a lap car of Jimmy Spencer, it created a minor setback. Luckily they avoided any damage, but it was a longer pit stop than normal to examine anything that might have affected the car. He only dropped to 4th, but it was enough to lose the ideal track position he had, and when a multi-car crash on lap 162 broke out, another flaw in the track's configuration was brought to light when Ernie Irvan and other leaders were racing back to the caution. The front stretch was so narrow, the slow car of Greg Sachs, who checked up, threw Irvan off course and into the wall. As Jeff came screeching in out of turn 4, he pounded the 28 car and the wall, trying to avoid the carnage, and his day was over. Not a good omen of what was to come. He returned to the action later to run for points, but a 30th place finish wasn't what the DuPont guys had in mind. The next year, just as had been the case in '97, a major wreck broke out in turn 1 just after the first lap, and Jeff was a victim this time. The transition into the turn was largely unpopular by the drivers, and you can see why. It was an awkward corner entry that couldn't handle much side-by-side racing, and if one car made a slightly wrong move, it caused a problem. Jeff wouldn't have to wait long this time to get roughed up, as his day was already ruined before he even broke a sweat. The wreck caused a red flag, and the Rainbow Warriors would do their best to salvage whatever points day they could, but ultimately didn't finish due to handling issues with a battered 24 car. Jeff wound up 31st, one spot down from the previous year, and things wouldn't get much better from there as far as Texas goes. On the bright side, he spent most of the rest of those 2 years winning in bunches, going back-to-back in the championship race and turning the series into his own playground. So no one was feeling sorry for the guy when one measly racetrack was kicking him around. 1999 wouldn't see any change in fortune either. As Jeff was coming out of turn 4 by himself, a tire blew and he smacked the outside wall and slid through the infield grass. The impact was rather violent and Jeff was visibly shaken up in the car. It took several minutes before he gathered himself, but was able to gingerly climb out and get to the infield care center. 3 races in and this place was taking a major toll on Gordon. 3 races, 3 accidents, and 2 DNFs. Sheesh. Maybe the turn of the century produces some better mojo? Yeah, no.
Up in turn 2, and there is one of the cars involved. Jeff Gordon again has been snake bit here in Texas. You see the damage to the hood and the left side of his Rick Hendrick Chevrolet, and there are other cars involved. Mike Blaney loose, everybody checks up, and it's Nadu who goes around off Gordon's bumper.
Right behind Gordon was, and there's Bill Evans. He's the one, buddy, that got up on top of Gordon.
Right on top there.
Fortunately, the damage was more cosmetic than anything, and the team was able to manage a respectable day by finishing 25th. But the standard set by the 24 team did not have celebrating a top 25 in their plans. At this point, Jeff needed to come up with some kind of ritual to break this curse. What did he do to piss off that state? I'd be heading to the Alamo and getting on my knees praying to the racing gods for mercy. Maybe sprinkle some barbecue seasoning on the grass and recite the eyes of Texas are upon you. This place hated Jeff for whatever reason. I bet he dreaded this day on the schedule every year and brainstormed ways to get out of participating in that race. As it turns out, he must have done something different because at long last, a 4-year stretch starting in 2001 and going through 2004 would produce 4 straight top 5 finishes, highlighted by a thrilling side-by-side battle for second with Dale Jr. in 2003 that stole the attention from Ryan Newman winning, in which Jeff got edged out. But believe me, he was more than happy to accept third after the tormenting hell he had been through the first 4 years. Maybe it was finally turning for him. After all, he won his 4th championship to start this run and he was still in the prime of his career. Well, not exactly. You can tell there's plenty more time left in this video. While the top 5 success didn't last, it wasn't like disaster struck again. It was just mediocre results during the next segment of Jeff's career. But one new caveat came into play that had to make him want to change his profession for a minute. Texas got a second date starting in 2005, meaning another chance for more bad voodoo for the 2014. The racing had actually improved and corrections to the errors the track crew made for a better product, but it didn't mean better results. After 3 straight races of 15th, 14th, and 22nd, Jeff once again clicked off 3 straight top 10s from 06 to 07, but the track would once again give him a dose of reality and not let him get too comfortable with himself. She was ruthless.
Jeff Gordon was hustling his car, trying to keep from going a second lap down, and it got away from him and into the turn 4 wall. That's what's put us under the second caution flag of the day.
And going way back, you can see him way back there. There he goes. He just lost it. I was looking right at it. The car just come around with him. He's been hanging on to that thing quite a bit all afternoon.
This actually did Jeff a favor by putting him out of his misery that day. The car was handling so bad he couldn't even drive it. At this point, it looked like there was no hope, no light at the end of the tunnel. Jeff had fulfilled his legacy, lived in the spotlight, made buddy-buddy with every corner of the NASCAR scene, but this was just looking like a place he was never going to get on the same page with. He could have accepted his fate, went through the motions every Texas race, and simply tolerated its existence. But little did anyone know, 1 year later, the impossible would be pulled off. In the closing laps, I bet Jeff's fans, pit crew, and Jeff himself were coming up with anything and everything that could happen to screw this up. A caution coming out, a tire going down, a random bolt of lightning. This seemed too good to be true. And with Jimmy Johnson, his old protege, closing in, the nerves had to be through the roof. But taking the checkered flag provoked a Texas-sized sigh of relief, and he could finally get that monkey off his back. Ironically, this happened to end a 47-race winless streak for Jeff. He had gone winless the previous season for the first time since his rookie year. Who would have thought this haunted house would be the place he ended it? You could see the relief on his face in victory lane, and he was aware of the weight lifted off his shoulders. You can't hold the all-time greats down forever. They're going to get theirs. I'd love to end the story here and say that Jeff went on to consistently succeed at Texas. After all, he had finally conquered the demon after 17 years of trying. We all want a happy ending. It's in our nature. The reality is, this would be the peak. She said, "All right, Jeff, I'll give you 1 day to revel in the jubilation. I respect your contribution to the sport and how illustrious your career has been. But that's it. After this, it's back to the slammer." After a modest 13th place run that fall, Jeff's emotions would begin to simmer in the spring of 2010. And not necessarily with his performance. It was aimed at his longtime teammate who was upstaging Jeff before his very eyes. They had their run-ins in the past. It's natural for a relationship as endured as theirs. You're going to have moments where your friendship is tested. But this was the beginning of Jeff's downfall at Texas Motor Speedway. As the two were racing hard for position with less than 100 to go, Gordon got into the back of the 48 and rooted him out of the way. And Jimmy didn't take too kindly to that. But Jeff saw things a different way and let out his thoughts on the radio.
4 times a little upset.
I guess they thought you got into him, I guess.
Oh, he's treated different than everybody else.
Jeff happened to have a strong car, and at this track, he knew it was a chance to build on breaking the curse. But it wouldn't end so kindly. On a late restart with 18 to go and fighting for a top 5 position, the field got stacked up 4 wide coming out of turn 4 and the wreckage was on. This resulted in yet another finish outside the top 30 at TMS, and the downward spiral was only getting started. That fall, Jeff wasn't a factor midway through the race, trying to manage his struggling car in the top 20. When a caution came out for Martin Truex hitting the wall, little did anyone know the attention was about to be turned to the other side of the track. Jeff Burton, a notoriously respectful driver and one of the veteran leaders in the garage, lost his cool in a tangle with Gordon from the previous lap, and pile drove him into the turn 2 wall. Both cars were junked, and Burton's car came to a rest well down the backstretch. When both drivers realized neither car was able to get going, they climbed out and their day was over. But Gordon had no interest in going to the infield care center just yet. Despite being hundreds of feet apart, he made a beeline for Burton with an enraged look on his face, and everyone knew what was about to happen. All that simmering emotion boiled over.
And Jeff Gordon's not happy at all.
And they're going to go and talk it out here. Oh, and this is... Oh, we got a fight breaking out.
Yeah, Jeff's not happy. Jeff Gordon not happy with what happened there.
Officials stepping in between, but this is far from over. I mean, there weren't even words exchanged. This was in your face.
I saw that coming because there was an ambulance behind Jeff Gordon's car for him to get in. He walked over there to the other one that they had for Jeff Burton.
They're fighting.
Afterwards, Burton expressed regret for the incident and owned up to making a mistake. He didn't intend to wreck Gordon, but wanted to get alongside him and reiterate he should have been mad at Burton's move. But it all went wrong. Gordon lost a lot of respect from Burton that day, and it would take a while before the two mended fences. Jeff would rebound somewhat with back-to-back top 10s in the fall of 2011 and the spring of 2012, a 6th and a 4th. But as you can probably guess by now, that would be short-lived. Both 2013 races would deliver a 1-2 punch to Gordon's team, back-to-back 38th place finishes, with the first being a tough pill to swallow. He was a top 5 car all night, and while running third with 24 to go, the front suspension burned out, and just like that, his night was over. The fall race would see no such promise. Early in the running, Jeff's right front tire went down in the worst possible spot, going into turn 1 and crunched into the outside wall. This was a double whammy, putting a dagger in his championship hopes that season. But nothing would compare to what would happen 1 year later. He pulled off a second place finish in a postponed to Monday race in April, but that November it all came crashing down. With Jeff's career in its twilight, I guess it was fitting the facility reared her ugly head one more time on his way out. This was the finishing move that left a long-lasting what-if mark on the back end of his Hall of Fame resume, something that'll be talked about for ages and for all the wrong reasons. In pursuit of a heated championship run with just a handful of races left in 2014, Jeff was closing in on that elusive 5th championship with a stellar campaign that was shades of the old Jeff Gordon. But with this being the first year of the playoff format, he had to finesse his way through a lot of hurdles and gimmicks to get there. Needing a win to ensure himself a chance in the season finale at Homestead, he was in position with a comfortable lead in the closing laps. But with a Clint Boyer spin bringing out a dreaded caution and restart, it was all put in jeopardy. When the green flag came back out, push came to shove, and Brad Keselowski, who was also having a dominant but controversial season, speared his way into Gordon's left side and caused a tire rub. Just half a lap later, he was sent spinning and essentially saw his championship chances go up in smoke. Fully aware of the egregious act that took place and the damning consequences that followed, Jeff saw red and sought out Keselowski. When confronting him, a rogue Kevin Harvick lit the fuse and the volcano erupted.
Nowhere, I just got slammed with the tube and it cut my left rear tire, and he's just a dipshit, you know. I mean, the way he races, I don't know how he's ever won a championship, and I'm just sick and tired. I mean, that's why everybody's fighting him and running him down. And
this unquestionably was one of the most infamous moments in NASCAR history. Not necessarily the act itself. Late race aggression is quite common in this business. But the fact that Jeff went from the cusp of a dream-come-true scenario in the penultimate stage of his career to being a victim of an aggressive driver ripping it away from him was nothing short of heartbreaking. No matter how you perceived him, you felt for him that night. If he had won that race or even finished in the top 5, I have no doubt in my mind he would have gone on to win his 5th crown. Do you blame Keselowski here, or just the traditional cruelty that Texas Motor Speedway bestowed upon him year after year? I'll let you decide. The next year, Jeff would announce 2015 would be his last in NASCAR as a driver. He had won over many fans to this point and was a shadow of his former villain persona. His career was so undeniably legendary, even Texas herself had to back off and give an applause. The track left him alone and gave way to a 7th and 9th place finish as he rode into the sunset, and he could finally put this curse to rest. The good news from all of this is whether he won 4 or 5 championships, people would still look at Jeff the same. A world-class, elite talent that transcended the sport to heights it never dreamed of over a near 3-decade span. He was a global icon that was so unavoidable, even those that never gave NASCAR the time of day knew who he was. While this video sheds on a negative sliver of his career, it has no intentions of demeaning what he meant to the sport. It's simply documenting an anomaly of a narrative that was as head-scratching as ever, and a lesson to everyone that every Superman has his kryptonite. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Be sure to like and subscribe like your life depends on it. This has been a Platinum Paradise video.